Can you imagine being diagnosed with brain cancer, two brain cancers, at the age of 15? Well, that's what happened to my guest today, Karl Pontau, and we talk about how that's affected his life and how that led into him becoming a storyteller and a storytelling coach and how he helps businesses connect with their ideal clients through storytelling.
You're listening to Espresso Jams, short, concentrated, delicious conversations about business, technology, and entrepreneurship. If you're just starting out on your business adventure or you're a seasoned business professional, I'm sure you'll find value in these short conversations. Espresso Jams is brought to you by Apexible, providing the tools, insights, and transformative structures to help you reach your business summit. I'm your host, Joe Matz. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Espresso Jams. Today, I'm with my buddy, Karl Pontau, and he is the owner of Squash and Stretch Productions. And we're going to be talking today with Karl. Hey, Karl, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, it's great to have you here, Karl. And
Yeah,
before we get started, let me ask you a question. Where are you
sure.
hailing from today?
Sure. So I am located in a city called Livermore, California. It's about 40 miles east of San Francisco, right on the edge of the SF Bay Area.
Okay. Are you at the foothills of the mountains that are west of there?
No, it's over the first set of mountains that first pass between like Fremont and the East Bay, and then we're basically right up against the Altamont mountain range or Altamont Hills. So if you go further east, you go over the Altamont Pass and end up in like the Central Valley, Stockton, Manteca, Sacramento, that area.
Okay. Well, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice.
Okay, so we got talking, and we're gonna replay some of that talk for you here live today.
Woo.
Tell us a bit about what you were doing before you started your own business.
Sure. So I actually have a story about why I started my company that informs the how and the what. Can I share that one?
Of course.
Cool. So I've been an artist my entire life. I grew up drawing, painting, sculpting, big Legos kid. And I got my passion for storytelling from my dad. He's a really good storyteller. And I knew I wanted to study animation when I saw the first Toy Story film. I was like, ooh, Dad, I gotta do that. That's so cool. And then beginning at 2002, I started to feel like something wasn't quite right with me physically. I've been a competitive swimmer my whole life, so I knew what I was supposed to feel like. And it wasn't like, oh, my shoulder kind of hurts. It's just like a general blah feeling. But by August, they still hadn't figured out what was wrong with me. And I had lost 50 pounds, had sunken cheeks and eyes. I was really pale, started to get really bad headaches. So my parents took me for an MRI up in Walnut Creek. And we were waiting around for another appointment when my pediatrician called and said he's going to drive up from Pleasanton to come talk with us. And we saw him walking up with this big envelope in his hands. You could tell he'd been crying. And he brought us into a little side meeting room. I remember I was sitting knee to knee with him in this big U-shaped chair with really high armrests, kind of leaning forward towards him, when he pulled out the results of the MRI and showed me I had 2 brain tumors.
Hmm.
And it felt like I got punched in the chest. I actually moved backwards in my chair. And for the next 2 weeks, everything sounded like the adults from Peanuts, kind of what, because I've never had the flu, never broken any major bones, never been stung by a bee. I'm pretty sure I've never been bitten by a mosquito. So to get brain tumor diagnosis at 15
Wow.
years old was a complete sucker punch out of nowhere.
Sure.
But I got so much help from friends and family, and my high school adjusted my schedule and got me a tutor so I could still graduate on time. And people I barely knew were giving food and gifts and other supports really inspired me to want to give back and help as many people as I could, because I'd probably be dead if it wasn't for all the help that I got.
Hmm.
And then in undergraduate school, as I was studying animation, there was a big student digital art and design competition I participated in, with the big screening at the end of like 1,000 people in this big auditorium. I knew maybe 10 people in the room. But when everyone laughed at the joke in my animation, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. I can connect with people and have a bigger impact with animation and storytelling. So after grad school, I started my company, and we tell exceptional stories for exceptional impact, helping tech, biotech, healthcare, and professional services companies attract more of their best clients and employees using storytelling and animation. No matter what sort of business you're in, whether it's B2C or B2B or even B2G, you're always still just dealing with humans. And humans tell stories. So by helping those sort of companies tell better stories, more people in the world get their lives improved, our clients' business does better. We get a happy client, everyone wins. It's a way for me to have a bigger positive impact on the world around me. And that's why I do what I do.
Now, what was it like creating that animation for the first time? You knew you were going to be presenting it in front of other people. What was that experience like?
I mean, it's always, I'm sure most people can relate to having kind of a being nervous, being up on stage or presenting in front of people. And it's very similar to that because it is very much um, putting yourself out there for criticism and critique. And it's something that I've definitely, with the animation background and being an entrepreneur, I've gotten more used to receiving criticism and feedback from people because it is essential for growth and improvement. And so
Sure.
it's something that I, at the time, was very nervous. But hearing that the response from people that they kind of got the joke and they found it funny and it had the impact it did was totally worth it. And I got that kind of like tingle on the back of the neck, like the adrenaline rush. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. This is kind of a validation that I'm on the right sort of path for my life when it comes to the sort of work and impact I want to have with storytelling and animation.
So the way you're talking about it, it's almost like the feelings, and almost exactly like feelings that I have felt when I've been on stage. But you weren't actually on stage. But
No,
your
I wasn't
production,
physically on stage. I
your
was,
baby, if you will, something
yeah,
that you created.
yeah. It's definitely whenever you're creating a story or a piece of art, like a piece of animation or some sort of video, it is very much if it's done right, it should be like an extension of you and who you are, and so it is very much still being on stage in a way. And often it's can be bigger than doing a live event because especially put it online, it's up there forever, and basically, and the audience is so wide, and it's not nearly as contained of a experience as if you're presenting it live to like a keynote address, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So um,
yeah.
there is some a little bit of uncertainty and nervousness when posting something like that. But if it's one of the things I remind myself is that it's uh, the impact I want to have. It wouldn't be possible without this step, and so it's worth the discomfort to um, be able to impact, influence other people, and inspire them, and hopefully make their lives better. And it would be kind of selfish of me to be able to create the stuff or tell the sort of stories and not actually apply it to help people out. To be more of a waste of potential than and it can outraise the pain or uncertainty of presenting myself in that way.
Sure, sure. Now, so after that presentation, when you got an affirmation or a confirmation that you were doing the right thing and you were connecting with people, how did your business evolve from that point?
Well, I mean, I that was undergraduate school, so I went to grad school after that and learned more about animation to be able to do it like the technically better and more about storytelling and stuff. And so when I initially started my company, it was really the differentiator was kind of focusing on the storytelling aspect of it because there's a lot of companies out there that make animations that look decent or look okay, but like the story is just not there, and it doesn't really matter how great your visuals are if there's no story,
Hmm.
then it's the animation is just not going to be that effective because people really connect with the stories. And so that's what the real differentiator for my animation side of my business when I was first starting out. And I realized over time that there were a lot of people that needed to be able to communicate stories to people in their target audience for their businesses or for their careers, but didn't have the budget or the means or the need for animation. And so that's I could do story coaching, and I have a background teaching for a number of years after grad school as well, to kind of as I was getting started. And I enjoy helping other people in that way, helping them see that aha moment where it finally clicks for them. They kind of go from looking at you to kind of staring like past you into the distance, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And seeing that sort of those epiphanies happen is one of my favorite things about the coaching side of things because it's not just a marketing tool or a strategy, but it's something that really reaches the core of what makes us humans and the way our brains are wired. And so the more people are able to tell the right sort of stories and empathize with each other and connect using stories, then the better off everyone will be. And in fact, what I like to tell people is that if I could snap my fingers and or cast a spell that would make everyone on the planet as maximally empathetic as humanly possible, but casting the spell would kill me, I'd still do it. Because my hope, and I think if people had more empathy and were able to connect, then a lot of the big problems facing the world would be either solved or much easily solved by people being able to collaborate and work together, not being so divided. But since magic doesn't exist, I'm going to use stories as the next best thing. So,
And what is it that you do with your stories that that increase and raise the level of connectivity between people?
sure, it's a great question, and it really comes down to the sort of relationships people are looking to have with like the businesses they interact with or they work for and with each other. I think just overall, empathy is a skill, and it's something that I think we just aren't taught how to use that skill or develop that most of the time. And so I think there's just this, if people can tell better stories about like I help coach people on how to tell stories like the one I told about myself. Everyone has some sort of story like that about their life and why they do what they do, and helping them also learn how to listen and actively connect with the people and hear their stories. And so it's when people are able to communicate what their audience actually cares about, not just what they find interesting themselves, then it really starts to build that sort of connection, and it what leads to either like getting that new hire or keeping or retaining employees or finding the sort of clients you want to work with, or just making a new friend or networking connection. Because people like so much, especially for companies, they feel like they're competing over people's money, and in reality, you're not going after people's money. When you do that, you'll miss it, because people can tell when they're being sold to, or it's like a kind of transactional sort of message, and people are frankly sick of that with how much it happens on like spam emails and on LinkedIn and Facebook, all these like ads and like messages you don't want that are basically like buy this thing, buy this thing. So the biggest brands out there that are like your Nikes, your Apples, your like Airbnb, your Coca-Cola, they all got that big because they realized they're not going after your money. They're first competing over your attention,
Right.
and then your emotions. Mm-hmm. So if you can win people's attention and their emotions, then the money will come.
Well, it's kind of like this the Starbucks brand that began charging very high prices for coffee, and they still do. But what they offer is an experience.
Yes.
How
yes,
does
and helping
that play into the story?
Absolutely, because when people are trying to explain what their business does or why someone should like work with them or be part of their team, they talk right now way too much about kind of what they do or what the person will be doing, and they don't really explain the experience and the emotional experience that people will have with their business. And they often don't need they tell it from their perspective, not the audience's perspective. And so by telling sort of stories and reframing the way they describe their business, they actually can not only attract more clients, but really differentiate themselves even in a commoditized market or a highly regulated market, and be able to charge more because of that experience they provide beyond just the cup of coffee or the product or service. And so that's one of the stories that people tell after they get the why story done is what's the experience you provide, what makes it different? Because I think the stat I've heard since the pandemic kicked off is 89% of companies are competing on client experience as a main differentiator, because things are so commoditized and so automated. And so being able to set higher expectations for the experience people will provide is really important, because people experience what they expect and they expect what they perceive. So if you can increase the perceived value of what your offering is by explaining the experience, that people actually have a better experience in working with you. There's a study I read about in a book where I think it was Predictably Irrational was the book by Dan Ariely, but he talks about how there's a test where in a restaurant over the course of the day, the food didn't change at all, but they would swap out the weight of the silverware at different tables. And when people had heavier silverware, they thought the food tasted better
Wow. So
because they
I'd like to,
expected a better
uh,
meal.
everything else was the same. The service,
Yes.
the food. Interesting.
They still
Because,
had to deliver a quality. If they brought out like poor quality meal, it wouldn't be as good. But you have to still like deliver on the high expectations. But if you set the expectations higher and then meet them, the people actually will
right.
have the better experience because they were primed to expect it.
They were
So
prime. And I can relate to that. I used to manage a restaurant. And one of the things that I asked for from the folks who I needed to ask was for heavier steak knives.
yeah,
I said, we are serving primo steak here. It is prime steak. It's all the good stuff. And we got these knives that just feel like, a little better than butter knives or the knife you might have in, to cut bread or something, a little knife.
yeah,
And we got these heavy wooden handles with these thick blades, and it felt better to me. And I expected when I go to a restaurant and I see a big steak knife like that, I'm like, oh, here comes the steak, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
It
You gotta go
it
make
does
sure.
raise my expectations. I never really thought about it the way you mentioned. But
I
yeah,
mean, it's just like with any sort of marketing. The reason why it's important to have high quality content marketing these days, like for animation, is that people will set their expectations for what your business is like based on that first view of like an animation or like a blog post or something like that. So
hmm,
the way I describe it is imagine so you can either present like imagine your business as a steak and you want people to eat your steak. So you can either present it on a nice plate with sides in a restaurant with nice ambiance or on a trash can lid in an alley. It's still the same steak, but just the way you present it will
right.
determine if people want to eat it or not. And so a lot of companies they put out the wrong sort of messaging or their website's not great or they put out like these videos that don't make a great first impression and they wonder why people aren't buying their product or investing in their services. And it's because you can have a great offer, a great business model, but if people don't perceive it as having value, you're going to be stuck. So it's a lot of the things that help people with is kind of reframing how they view their business because so many people get into the work because of they love what it is, they love what the process is like for them, they love all the minutiae and detail, and so when they go to market, they present all that sort of stuff, and the flat, harsh reality is nobody else cares about it as deeply as you do. Otherwise, they'd be doing it too. So if you talk about just what you care about, unless you're trying to sell to yourself, you're not going to attract people.
Certainly, you have to talk. You have to speak to your audience because they are the hero of the story.
Yes.
It's not the provider. You want your clients, you want your prospects to be the hero of the story. And
Yep.
I like what you say about the experience. I mean, I have worked with folks and I've hired coaches, I've hired others because of the way they make me feel. Now, I've got to know them, I've got to like them, and I've got to trust them. There's a know, like, and trust.
Yep.
But if they make me feel like this is going to be a good experience, this is going to help me get where I want to go, and I trust them and I like them. Um, I think that makes a lot of difference. And it's hard
Yeah.
for me to pinpoint the exact moment where I said this feels good. And I
Yeah. It can
don't know
be
if there is an
tricky.
exact moment or it's a build up to a crescendo. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely correct that it's when you feel it's the right fit that you end up buying because we actually physically our brains make decisions with emotion every single time. And for those of you who said, no, I don't make decisions with emotion, sorry, you still do. You just rationalize it later. And oftentimes you don't realize you made a decision until weeks or months after, especially if it's a big one. But people around you can tell that you've made a decision based on the way your behavior changes, and so it's knowing that people make decisions with emotions and that it's essential for trying to persuade or motivate people or influence them to buy in. Then it's essential to have the sort of that sort of emotional evocative language when you're describing the experience or the results, or explain about your business. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are still stuck on more transactional, drier. Here's what we do. Here's all our years of experiences when we went to school. Here's how many like awards we've won, and it just that people don't resonate with that. But like telling a sort of story about why you got into this line of work and the sort of impact you want to have, even if you haven't been through something super crazy, traumatic, or dramatic, it's actually sometimes even better because people relate more to people they share common experiences with or common values with. So if you've been through the same sort of things, like growing up, that your best clients have been through, then you really want to share that sort of story, because they'll go, oh my gosh, he totally gets where I'm coming from. He shares my values, and that builds that trust quicker. That's why also like people like kind of follow and laud celebrities, but you don't really ever feel connected to them because you can't relate to their experiences because it's such a different world and that they live in. And so it's when you're trying to connect with people, the more authentic and vulnerable you can be with your story and show how, I like the term flossom, where you're not perfect, but you've made mistakes. You have
Right.
like fears and anxieties and flaws, but you're still like have a lot of value to give, and you've experienced great things. You're an expert in what you do. But when you just try and put up that I'm perfect persona that so many people have on social media and like Instagram, and they don't show their flaws,
Right.
it's really hard to connect with people because it's just not real. It's not authentic. And
Right.
I'm not saying to go completely authentic and kind of disregard your impact on other people, but having that like authenticity plus emotion equals flossom. And that's a great sort of barometer when you think about your messaging for building that trust more quickly with people, because that's what resonates with especially the people that are going to be your best clients, not just any old client.
Yeah. And I realized that recently I launched a course online. So it's an online do it yourself at your own pace. And
Mhm.
it's a series of videos. And a couple people mentioned I liked the authenticity. While you were recording, I saw you made mistakes, but you didn't cancel it out. You made a mistake, and then live on the video, you went back and said, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that," or "Let's call this something else." And you know, I wanted to be authentic. I'm not perfect, but I had a lot of information to share, and it was interesting the feedback I got that people said they liked that. I thought that was a flaw in the program, and I decided to leave it anyway. But they actually liked that.
Yeah, it's a interesting phenomenon that's been happening the last 4 or 5 years, I think, is that if you have an overly polished video too professional, even same thing for like images on like LinkedIn, if you put like a stock image up, people kind of skim by it because it's obviously staged and professional, and it's not authentic.
Hmm.
If you have a video where you do flub up, or you have to backtrack, you have to correct yourself, and then the lighting's not absolutely perfect, you don't have any of this sort of like fancy like soundstage sort of thing, and it's more real and more authentic like that. That really resonates because I think just in general, even before the pandemic, people were feeling disconnected, and they were craving a sense of belonging, connection with
Hmm.
each other and where they worked. And so the pandemic just going to unshook everything, or going to shook up everything and disrupted it all. So people felt more disconnected because of the social distancing and quarantine. And then when they realized kind of more of what they wanted from the relationships with their business, like the places they worked, that sort of thing, the places they did business with, they realized they wanted a more personal human connection that's more authentic and not an overly kind of like corporate speak,
Right.
like like hierarchical environment like businesses have been for so long. And so the what people are looking for changed much faster than most businesses can adapt,
Hmm.
which is why we're seeing great resignation, great reshuffle, great recombobulation, whatever you want to call it. It just, there's this disconnect now between what people want from their relationships with companies and what companies are offering. And so it does take a reframe of how companies relate to their workforce.
Right. I mean, I think nobody's perfect, right?
Of
And I
course.
don't think we should even strive for perfection. We should strive for excellence.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
we're gonna, we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna do things a little bit off. It's not gonna be perfect the first time, but how do you get better? Well, you get better by doing it again and making those small incremental improvements. And it can take, depending on what you're doing, it can take a while, but you're out there being yourself, being authentic, and you may have a lot of knowledge to share, a lot of information that could be very helpful, but maybe you're not the best presenter. Maybe you wouldn't get a high score at the Toastmasters Club because you use a lot of ums and ahs, but you get that information out there. And I think that is so important. And that's what I'm hearing from the message that you're telling and from your story.
yeah, you're pretty much on track. There is like a great quote by Vince Lombardi where he talks about his team always aiming for perfection, knowing they weren't ever going to reach it, but by aiming that high, they would achieve that level of excellence that made them successful. And so I agree. If you're trying to actually achieve perfection, that's a problem because it's not realistic. And trying to present yourself as perfect is going to backfire because it's not authentic. But if you internally set your goals for perfection, knowing you're not going to reach them, but still do as best you can, and then when you do mess up or do have issues, own them and wear them on your sleeve and let people know, hey, this is something happened to me that is kind of an embarrassing or like a mistake. People really relate to that because it humanizes you, and
Right.
it's not just this armor that everyone's been taught to put up by kind of growing up in today's society.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. So, Karl, let me ask you a question now.
Sure.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions into one. What do you
Okay.
have going on? What can you share with our audience? And what would be the one thing you want to leave the audience with today?
Sure. So something I'm going on I'm really excited about is I'm working on I'm going to be launching a new hybrid coaching program later this month that's aimed at helping companies attract their best employees and retain them by optimizing their job posts, career pages, internal communications, and building up their active listening skills. And so I have a survey out where I'm looking to get information from owners, HR professionals, recruiters on what sort of pain points they're experiencing and how much time they want to put into it and like a potential price points. And so I'm giving away 10 copies of the program to people that submit to this survey. It takes about 3 minutes to fill out. It's really simple. So I'll give you the link to that to share with your viewers. And if they're interested in this and basically learning how they can use storytelling to attract their best employees and keep the ones they have, that'd be a great thing. And then for those of you that are looking to improve their marketing messaging, I have a complimentary 30-minute session link that I'll also give to you. Where basically we'll review their website and show them at least 5 ways they can improve their messaging to attract more of their best clients by optimizing the storytelling on their website.
Awesome. That will all be in the show notes. So
Yes.
fantastic. Fantastic. Karl, I have enjoyed our conversation. I have learned from our conversation as always.
Cool. Thank you
So,
so much.
so thank you and have a great day. And hey, we're recording this the beginning of the week, so I hope you have a great week.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye now. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Espresso Jams. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on your preferred channel and never miss another episode. If you'd like more business tips on technology, entrepreneurship, and doing better, you can find me on LinkedIn at Joe Matz, that's Joematz, or go to my website, apexable.com, that's apex-able.com. I'm your host, Joe Matz, wishing you an awesome day.